Temple Mount in the Old City of Jerusalem. And please join the media club, Yom Tov Media Club.com. Please join the media club. Now, there was a rabbi who was the only certified heretic in our generation, and what it takes to be a proper heretic, or in Hebrew it's called an apikoros. What it takes to be a certified apikoros heretic is you have to know all of Torah and then go against it. And so this person knew all of Torah and went against it. And he would even drive with his shtreimel on Shabbos. He would drive, he would look out the window and say "Good Shabbos" to people driving by in his shtreimel. Now this wasn't in Israel. I mean, if it was in Israel, he'd get stoned. But he was, he was in Colorado most of the time.
So and he got stoned.
What's that?
So he got stoned.
Yeah, he got stoned, right? Colorado doesn't begin with C for nothing. Yeah? Everything begins with C in Colorado. You got cannabis, coffee, and what was the third one? Is craft beer. And there's two cities that begin with C. Colorado, two places that begin with C. Colorado and Seattle. And every block has one of those things. So anyway, so what does it take to be an apikoros? And the answer is it takes all of Torah. You got to know all of Torah and then still go against it. So I was saying that he was coming over here for one of his children's ufruf, and they needed a place for him for Shabbos, but no one would take a heretic into their house for Shabbos. So she asked me. And the reason she asked me was because I'm in outreach, and she just figured my Shabbos table is filled with heretics all the time. Like not believing in God, was probably par for the course for many of my guests in those days, and so but of course that's not a heretic. That's someone who just doesn't believe in God. A heretic believes in God and goes against God. So it's a different story. Anyway, I didn't say no. I said I would ask my Rebbe, and I asked my Rebbe, and my Rebbe said I could have him as long as he behaved himself, which he did. And so the question is, how did he become a heretic? And the answer is that he had had, I believe, too much LSD. And LSD tends to break down distinctions of things, meaning everything is one on that. And that's why someone will feel tremendous kinship to literally any, it could be a rock. You could find someone on LSD just hugging a rock who's become his new best friend. And it blurs all lines. It just brings, it brings a natural unity to our otherwise distinguishing minds. Our minds generally distinguish things. We want to know if something's safe. We want to know if something's good for us. We want to know if something's healthy. We want to know, we have a lot of questions to ask before we get involved in something. But someone under the influence of this particular chemical compound is going to not distinguish things so much and actually have an intimate relationship with a rock. But the thing is that there are certain people that can have their distinction abilities, their abilities to distinguish things completely blown out and stop distinguishing altogether. Well, Judaism believes deeply in distinction. We are just, for example, in the halachic process, when we study Jewish law, we are literally splitting hairs. I mean, we are splitting hairs of with great distinction to know whether we can do something, cannot do something, whether it's edible or not edible, whether it's whether it's permissible or not permissible. We are really splitting hairs on that, because we believe that God created a world that does require us to make distinctions. And the funny thing is that once you know there's a God, well, then everything's one with God, because there's no Home Depot in heaven. God did not go to Home Depot to create the world. He didn't go to Lowe's. He didn't go to Costco. He didn't go to, if all there was God, so what did he create the world out of? Create the world out of himself. And so therefore the whole world's ultimately of God. And therefore, maybe there really are no distinctions. So therefore, someone who's really into Kabbalah could actually say maybe there's no distinctions at all. Well, then how would we know anything's distinct? And there's only one answer that could tell you that, because once you realize that everything's made of God, because if all there was God, and he created the world out of all there was, which was him, so then the whole world's made of God, and therefore everything's one. So how would we ever know anything's distinct? And the answer is that we have a prophetic text called Torah, and Torah distinguishes everything. But if we didn't have a prophetic text called Torah, then we would not be able to make distinctions other than very natural things like distinguishing grass from pavement. You know, like one hurts a lot more than the other when you're playing soccer. You know, it's a lot easier to fall on grass. So you could have natural distinctions. And as a surfer, you know, we had to distinguish a lot of variables for our own safety, and also just to, you know, there's just so many variables that are all distinct from each other. And to get them all to kind of come together at once is that magical day. You should know, by the way, surfing's a lame sport as far as consistency. Because when you're talking about weather and tide and swell direction and wind speed and the swell frequency and the bottom contours of the ocean, which shift depending on the sands and the whatever's going on over there. I mean, to get that magical day is like, you know, it's a couple times a year. And, you know, what a very unfaithful sport. You know, and you spend most of your time fantasizing about it. And speaking of fantasizing, us surfers are in big fantasy mode right now, because the Pro Tour is hitting Jeffreys Bay, South Africa, on July 10th. I think the window's 10th to the 20th, something like that. So we're all very excited for that, because you get to watch the top surfers in one of the best spots in the world, exactly in the season where it often is breaking the best. So we're excited about that. I don't think it's very good for my marriage, but I don't think sports are good for anyone's marriage. At least this sport is, you know, a couple times a year you get those special moments. Now, here's what I wanted to share with you today, is that particular compound that caused the heresy probably of this particular rabbi is what caused the heresy of the generation. Because there was a period of time in the 1960s, late 60s and 70s, where you know, the young people of Western civilization were introduced to these compounds, and they were, you know, there was a whole wave of people who were there. I don't know if any of you are old enough.
I was there.
He was there.
69.
You were in Berkeley in '69.
I took acid at the Grateful Dead.
Wow, that's amazing.
Infect me.
Amazing.
Some of us are old.
Some of you are old enough to know about those times. And some of you experienced them, like this gentleman over here. Got to experience it firsthand. And what happened was, what happens when people do this stuff is that distinctions kind of blur. Everything kind of blurs into oneness, which is kind of God's world, and that's called a mystical experience. And it actually changes you fundamentally. And your ability, your racism might go way down, because you start to feel the commonality between you and people who otherwise might be considered foreign to you. Like, you don't recognize their foreignness so much. You recognize much more the commonality when everything's one. And it just, everything just becomes one. And it can go so far as to giving birth to a generation like we have today, where people actually want to take the most fundamental binary thing, which is male and female. You know, like, even plants are either male or female. Every animal is male or female. I mean, this is just general. Like, it's basic anatomy. And that today's generation would like to go so far as to even blur the binary gender of human beings. Which is like, and I actually saw it. I do visit other countries quite a bit, but I'm usually not around town so much. I'm usually like being whisked around from synagogue to synagogue. But I did have one class in Manhattan, and I stopped by a microbrewery to pick up a couple beers for Shabbos. And I got to actually see people who it was not clear which gender they were exactly. And so we live in a generation where they're even, it's almost getting legislative. In Canada, it already is legislative, but getting legislative to protect the rights of anyone who chooses that gender is no longer binary to be, within the realm. Now, of course, that makes us Jewish people who still believe in our prophetic texts. We believe that this is God's will. And so it's very interesting because we're a real dichotomy. On the one hand, we know all is one because God created the world out of himself, and therefore everything is totally one. Yet at the same time, we have all this distinction because the same God that created the oneness is the same God that gave the prophecies that distinguish everything. And we're cool with that. We can live in both worlds because when it's time for us to contemplate and meditate upon the oneness, so we will cover our eyes, we will say Shema Yisrael, we're in that oneness, like we're good with that. But at the same time, there's a lot of distinctions that we're involved with. And that's good. And it works. It really works. It creates, there's a certain longevity to us and a moral and long-living tradition that really is eternal. And it's something that as long as we honor it, meaning honor the prophecies and the distinctions, then life will work pretty well for us. And we'll also outbreed everyone. Because part of that is that we are binary and male and female match, and obviously that is the combination that creates the next generation. And therefore, by believing in the binariness and the fact that I belong with a woman and a woman belongs with a man, and that we belong creating the next generation. So that ultimately will outlast the philosophies, because those are just philosophies. They don't, they will not outlast. I'm sorry, you should never say just philosophy. Philosophies are super important, but because the people of that philosophy have a negative birth rate, so it's really, in the end, just going to be a blip of history. And the thing we do have to watch out for, though, which is a little scary, is that it does lead to meaninglessness. Because, where do you get meaning? Where do you get meaning? The answer is meaning comes from distinguishing concepts and thoughts. Like, how does anything become meaningful unless you distinguish something in some way? Not everything's vanilla, and if everything was vanilla, we would have meaningless lives. And so meaning comes from distinction. So it does. There are dangerous things about everything being one. Besides the fact that people who ascribe to that will ultimately not breed another generation. So that's extinction. So that's pretty dangerous. But there are also people who commit suicide, and meaning they extinguish themselves, which is, that can be the effect of psychosis, but it could also be the effect of meaninglessness. Most people who have thoughts of suicide are usually, besides ones who everything's going wrong, but let's just say that not everything's going wrong, but that they feel life's meaningless. So why does anything matter at all? And since they're suffering anyway, so why not just end it? And so the meaninglessness has now been able to really proliferate through social media, where there's no more edge to an idea. An idea can just carry on from smartphone to smartphone like wildfire. And the whole culture can get into such a state of meaninglessness that people, so we've had this, I forget what the percentage was, I just read it the other day, but there's been this massive increase in people taking their own lives. That's pretty negative. Um,
Like 25 vets in America every day. You know,
25 what?
vets, Army veterans.
Oh, vets.
Yeah, some really high number every day. Like,
Mm-hmm. That might be a little different, and I don't know if that's from meaninglessness so much. Now, the other thing that you got to watch out for, and this is something that is a bit of a red flag that you got to watch out for, is that I don't know how to say this exactly, so I'll do my best. Is that when you want to say nothing means anything, there's no distinction to anything. So then saying so could be offensive. You understand? Saying there's a distinction, saying things are different, or saying that can be offensive to people. And so you can have government start stepping in and enforcing laws that prevent you from offending anybody. Which, you might say, well, that's nice. I mean, you don't want to offend anybody. But it shouldn't be a law that you can't offend anybody. And do you stand for anything if you can't offend anybody? Like, what do you stand for in the end? If offending somebody is forbidden, so then what do you stand for?
political correctness.
And who?
It's offensive to the flip side.
Right. And who do you?
Who's the judge of that?
Yeah. Also, who's the judge? But who? If you can't be offended, if it's forbidden to offend you, how do you ever correct yourself? Meaning, what? If isn't it part of like? Isn't it part of the shape of you is your? First of all, you're having offended or being offended has shaped a lot of you.
Offending someone and making someone uncomfortable in order for them to grow are different things.
That's also the case, but but what I really want to say was the ability to offend is what's had us grow to who we are today. Like we've all grown a lot from our ability to be offended by others. Yeah. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
Is there a difference though between offending somebody and challenging them? To live in a world where you're not challenged, there's no growth at all.
Sure.
And we should try to live in a world where we accept being challenged. And I think there's a difference between being offended and being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I suggest maybe that's what you're talking about, Rabbi, is challenging us. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, and I think, but I'd rather than distinguishing challenge and offense, is that we should have free speech.
You have an opinion.
We should have free speech, and we should be able to say, even though, see, I'm not challenging anybody by having free speech, but someone may see something I wrote and be offended. But really, you're saying it better. They're being challenged.
Yeah.
And I heard Jordan Peterson say something nice. Is that how he's spoken up about England, Canada's law of that you have compelled speech when it comes to people's chosen gender pronoun. And so he refused that, and he but the principle he said that I liked is that your identity is a negotiation. You have to negotiate who you are. It's not something that no one can. I just kind of like that. Your identity is a negotiation.
What did he mean by it?
So what was the original topic?
Well,
of this
like
class?
we don't know. When like let's say you want to be this holy Jewish woman, yeah. But let's just say you weren't. I believe you are, but let's just say you
Work
weren't.
in progress.
Yeah, but let's just say you weren't at all.
Okay.
But you really want to be seen that way.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to see it that way. It's a negotiation. And then as we get to know you and start to see, wow, she keeps Shabbat and she keeps kosher and she learns Torah and she doesn't speak Lashon Hara, and that's all you negotiating about your identity. And then you've now properly negotiated your identity, and now we will see you as holy. But for you to come in and demand a certain anything without having properly negotiated for it, you understand? Like I like that thought. I like that thought that once you compel people to respect all, whatever someone happens to decide they are that day, it's like, no, you must negotiate that. And good luck negotiating that, because people may offend you and say the opposite, and they may actually even be right, which means you may have to backtrack a little on what you're trying to. But we're talking about ultimately integration. Is that you have to really integrate things to be seen a certain way. You wanted to say something?
I think Jordan Peterson was saying that in response to our laws in Canada, where.
Oh, you're from Canada?
Yeah. Toronto, and so at U of T, where you can identify as whatever you want to identify as, but he's saying if you put down here male, female, or whatever, he's saying, but your identity is a much larger thing. It's like it's okay to just tick off this box because your identity is not necessarily in that box. It's a much larger thing. So
Right.
you're allowed to define yourself that way, instead of arguing that I want to identify as a male or whatever.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I like that you guys are getting into this discussion here. Yes.
I just want to interrupt this topic to bring up something, because I was having a conversation the other day about it.
Okay.
Was what he said about the challenges not exactly what I said, just said in a different wording?
You mean the other day?
No, just now. I just want to make a point that I said something, he said the same thing, but in a different wording, and...
How do I relate to yours? I didn't even remember what you said. What did you say?
I said offending and pushing someone, making someone uncomfortable in order to push them to grow.
Yeah, I liked what you said. And I liked what he said. You said the same thing.
Right, I'm just saying. It wasn't a question or anything, it was just a point I wanted to make.
Clarification.
And we said the same thing.
I thought you did say the same.
He got the
But he-
approval because he's a man. That's what he doesn't like.
Thank
Oh,
you.
God
Thank
forbid.
you.
No,
That's all
no,
I'm
you
saying.
lost
That's all I'm
the
saying.
approval because you're a woman. But only in your own eyes. Because I would never think that way. So I would never, ever have approved his more than yours.
I was only bringing it up because I had a conversation the other day about microaggressions. I just wanted to bring this up so people took notice. That's all.
Oh, so yeah, that's your own hypersensitivity. I heard you both saying something synonymous.
I think you're wrong,
And-
but maybe you'll think about it later. We'll see.
Oh, I'm not the guy who's gonna say I'm not misogynist. I'm
So
like,
Are you offended or challenged?
I'm
me?
not. I'm not.
No, she's talking to me.
Oh, good. I'm
Yeah.
good. I wanted to point it out. Just
No,
saying.
I believe I'm misogynist. I never thought I was misogynist until I changed Siri's voice to a male. And I noticed I don't get as pissed off at her. It's really weird. It's really weird. Like, I was getting frustrated no end, and then one day I went on Siri and it offered a male's voice. And I was like,
My series, I mean.
yeah, I'll try that. So I'm sure yours is. Just kidding. So I switch it to a. She's messing with me. I'm messing with her. So I changed it to a male, and now when Siri blows it, I'm just like, yeah, that's cool.
Did Siri change his
No
name?
problem.
Did Siri change his name?
No. My Siri, it's still a woman, but she's had some kind of hormonal shift. So anyway, but yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I'm raised by a male chauvinist. I have only brothers, and I'll tell you the truth that as much as that set me up to not be really totally the best politically correct Hasidic man, as people probably see me as, that I'm not that good. I'm really not that good, because I really was raised by this guy. But I do like it very much because a lot of people, maybe a little after my generation, there's a lot of difficulty with same-sex attraction going on with people a little younger than me. Like I'm like people about 10 years younger than me and down, same-sex attraction is something that a lot of people struggle with. Many of them are married, many of them are part of observant communities where it's not, it's not really part of the traditional community structure. And so it's a very painful thing for them. And I work with people with same-sex attraction who are struggling with it and need to talk to somebody. I do a lot of that. But I missed all that in having this kind of womanizer father, because it's just like he set us up from the youngest age about how we look at sexuality. So it was a really good thing. And you want to know something very interesting is the omission of sexuality in the Haredi community has caused a tremendous propensity towards same-sex attraction amongst the girls and the boys growing up, because the teenage years are sexual years. Now that was never an issue because 200 years ago, girls got married between 12 and 14, and boys got married between 14 and 16. So when you hit those ages where you have these feelings that want to be physical feelings, like there's feelings that also come with a physical element to them. Well, you're married during those years, and so you've got the perfect situation. But what happened was history went on, and marriage got bumped up, and so in a way, I'm very thankful that I was not raised in a anti-binary society of the modern millennial, and I was raised by that good chauvinist sports fanatic father, and hey, watch the cheerleaders, everybody watch the cheerleaders. That was his announcement to us, and I was so not like that. I was like, that just made me uncomfortable. Every man's scared to death of women. Every man is scared to death of women. Now, there's two ways to deal with fear: fight or flight. Fight is you dominate them. Flight is you run away from them, and thank God I chose flight. Now, I had no idea that I was going to wind up being an observant Jew. And I pity the fool who chose to dominate women and then later finds out there's a God in Torah, and now they have to become observant, only to have lost all purity in the process of their secular, years. And so I pity the fool who chose fight, but thank God I chose flight, which is very interesting for a lead guitar, lead singer, surfer, party animal to choose flight. But I went to bed alone every night. And was very lonely actually, and quite embarrassed about myself, and there were a lot of lonely years there in all that party time, and so I'm hardly perfect on this subject, but we also got to be careful of hypersensitivity on the subject, and I certainly I may even be guilty as accused, but I don't believe I am. You got to understand, when you're standing in my position and this becomes like a discussion like that, so I have to be on everyone's side all the way, and I'm looking for as much commonality and distinguishing the conflict, and then we're going to somehow see how it's all true and real. So my goal is to agree with you more than to conflict with you. And the fact that you two were teamed up, to me, I thought was a positive thing. And it was not I was in the middle of a point when you had mentioned yours, so I continued with my point, but I was at a nice pregnant pause when you made yours, which gave me ample time to now go into that. And I saw that it's a wave in the room, because if she's saying it and he's saying it, so it's going together, so that's where I went with it. But I'd just like to share with you, since this class has just been the craziest class, and I think it comes as a result of, this is my fourth class of the day today, and I think I'm a little burnt out this particular day. But what I'd like to share with you is just the craziest thing. This is the least politically correct thing you've ever seen in your life. But
I doubt that.
but I just want to show you this very interesting thing. Is that when you think of a person and you break up their interests or whatever into a pie chart, all of these have to do with their identity, which that's a lot of identity, but But I mean, will you help me fill in the chart of what could be a person's identity? So, meaning things that make up their identity. So, it could be like, they're into money a little bit.
Teacher.
It could be they're into teaching.
Sports.
Could be
Their
they're,
job.
okay, athletics.
Nationality.
Okay, yeah, let's call that culture.
Okay.
Their work, their job.
Okay, work. What else? What other things create identity?
Family?
Okay, family. Yeah, family's big.
Values.
Okay, their values.
Upbringing.
Upbringing.
Friends.
Friends. You guys are doing great.
Media.
What?
Media.
Media, yeah. I'd like to include music. Or let's call it the arts, because people have a relationship to creativity. Or we'll call it creativity.
Creative hobbies.
Okay, creativity, which will include the arts and music and all those things. What else might someone be into? Spirituality. We forgot. Like here we are in Jerusalem. like the spirituality. Okay, we got one left.
Their appearance.
Appearance. Okay, maybe there.
It's like less like
Being a sex symbol.
Okay, so here we go. I'm not even going to write anymore. We could write a lot more, obviously, because people are. What makes up an identity would be I need more slices. I need a bigger pie, more slices. Clear? Now, here's the freaky part. You guys forgot something.
Gender.
Sexuality.
Sexuality. Excellent. So I'm going to put it. And here's the thing. You guys fell right into my trap. You fell right into my trap. Which is good, but it's also kind of obvious with a group in Jerusalem. But I believe that slice is even too big. For a married person, let's call this person a married person, who's sexually active with their spouse of the opposite gender. Sorry to use that word in 2019, but I'm going to. But someone of the opposite gender, and I hope everyone knows what that means. And they're, I believe that slice is way too big. I mean, for example, I'm known to some people. It could be some of you knew me before you walked in this classroom, and so you have a certain concept of me. But I highly doubt that this made the. I highly doubt that this made the pick. You know, of my sexual preferences and you know, lifestyle. I imagine that just wasn't one of the things you were thinking too much about. Like, I don't know, anyone in here been a student of mine? You've been a student of mine for a while. What's your name? Yeah. Shima, yeah. You've been coming to my class for a while.
I haven't come in a while, yeah.
You haven't come in a while, but it's nice to see you, by the way.
It's good to see you.
And how often do you think about my sexuality?
Not even
Never.
around.
How's never?
If you combine it with fertility, you know, producing children. That's
Right.
what I mean.
Good. Anyway, you get what's going on here? So here's the thing that I want to share, and this is a crazy principle. It's very not politically correct. No one's going to like what I'm about to say unless you do like what I'm about to say. You'll like it. Are you ready for this? This is the freaky thing. Is that anyone who is involved with normative, sorry to use that term, normative, or should we say prescribed, sexual activity, which includes marriage, before any of that, because if it's not married, it's not prescribed that it should be taking place. But anyone who's involved in normal, prescribed sexual activity, one's sexuality, which may be very prevalent. I mean, you look at some of these Hasidic people in my community, they have like 14 kids, you know, those kids didn't come from nowhere. Yeah. As Rodney Dangerfield said, the best thing about having kids is making them. So those kids.
Sex ain't all it's cracked up to be.
So anyway, so it really takes up a tiny slice of the pie, but here's the principle. The principle is that the second someone is involved sexually in a non-normative fashion, otherwise meaning they deviated from the normative sexual practice. Anyone who deviates, otherwise known as sexual deviance, which is a very, I'm opening up that term very liberally here. Sexual deviance is anything besides that which is prescribed by the Creator through the prophecies of the Torah. That anyone who's involved in sexually deviant behavior, meaning it deviates from the prescription, what happens is, ready for this? Now, I can do two things. I can either start erasing all this and just start drawing an arrow throughout the box, or he might still be into all of this, but it's all really to get that. Or, I don't know. So what I'm gonna do is just go like this. Because a lot of this really gets sacrificed.
It's like, I don't remember Bill Clinton.
And what happens is this becomes their identity. That sexuality becomes the identity. And guess what? You want to hear the craziest thing? That Torah, our Torah, calls someone involved in anything other than prescribed normal sexual behavior, it calls that person, if it's a male, he's called a kadesh, and if it's a female, she's called a kadesha. Which is really weird. That's a holy person, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't someone who's kadosh holy? Like Shabbat is kadosh, like it's the Torah is the kadosha, the holy Torah. And the Jewish people are Am Kadosh, like the holy nation. What is this word? So the answer is that the word kadosh literally means separate. Shabbat is separate than the rest of the week. The Jewish people are a separate nation amongst the Gentiles.
So the question
Something that is kadosh, if you separate the 10th animal to be part of the offering of the temple, because every 10th animal, it's been separated out. That animal is now kadosh. Your first fruits are separated as kadosh. They're separated. The word separate means kadosh. And here's the wild thing, is that the Torah calls sexual deviancy under the word that they have separated out that one little part of their body. No offense on the little. But that one little part of their body. That they have, because that part of their body was used or wants to be used or fantasized about being used, whatever it is. But the second that it goes outside prescribed sexual activity, that person automatically, it starts taking over. Until people will actually say that they came out of the closet to let everyone know that this is who I am, which is a really weird thing to do. I mean, can you imagine I did that right now? I mean, it'd be a little graphic, but you know, you'd all be like running for your lives if that happened right now. But you'd all just say, like, excuse me, Rabbi, that is not who you are. That's just part of the anatomy. And leave it to our Torah to just like bullseye that one. Like Torah just bullseyes that one. Just nails it. Like the whole subject, which has confused so many people to the point where it's almost like observant Jews today feel apologetic for being binary in gender and being married, you know, like we have to somehow apologize for it and explain it. When our Torah itself like nails the whole subject in one word. That someone who is doing anything other than normal sexual activity, and this includes anything. Notice anyone, I counsel a lot of people who watch pornography. Counsel a lot of people. At any given time, I could have 5, 6, 7 people locked into porn addiction. And it's just, it consumes them. It makes no sense because if that same person can't stop watching windsurfing, they would be a little upset about the wasted time. But they wouldn't be coming to me for counseling for watching windsurfing. Because no one's going to get, even if it consumed you, okay, big deal. So you're wasting a lot of your time watching YouTube windsurfing videos. But we see no matter what it is, it could be someone who's perfectly heterosexual, but he's not being faithful, or she's not being faithful. It will consume them. It will absolutely consume them, and it will rot and come to the light, meaning it will get revealed, and all hell's going to break loose over there. Anytime that the Torah is telling us that part of your life is so private, that part of your life it's yes, it is within the realm of your identity, but it is such a sanctified thing, and the only way that you can keep it under wraps, meaning in control, as in perspective, in its right place, the only way to do that is by having what is called prescribed normative sexuality. And as long as that is in its place, the rest of your life is kicking, man. The rest of your life, you're going to be powerful. Why? Because now all of your mental and emotional and instinctual real estate has opened up for real contribution in the world, to make a difference for the world, to do something with this bag of bones that you got. And that's how important marriage is that we have to have that part of us covered so that we can actually start making a difference. And so every single person in this room has to make a deadline for their marriage. Because what happens is a lot of people don't feel ready. Well, human beings that don't feel ready for marriage will never feel ready, because, I mean, ask anyone in the room who's married. Are you ready now? We got people, how many years you guys are married?
47.
47 years. Are you ready for marriage?
Yeah.
No, you're not.
He's not.
He's not. He's not. There's no such thing as being ready for marriage. Marriage is what tests you for the rest of your life. It's just such an intense gauntlet that it's the ultimate crucible that purifies your whole being is through marriage. This is why so many Jewish men in California marry Asians. It's because they don't test you. They're just happy you came home. They don't care what time. And that's why there's female clergy in California. Like, there's female rabbis and cantors and Torah readers and presidents of shuls. Never existed such a thing. But they see that the men are such bums when it comes to Judaism. And they don't want to deal with the thrashing of a Jewish woman. And so the women are like, okay, so then if they won't lead, we will. We're going to lead.
They can't limit on the minion.
Sure.
They can't get a minion on it.
Sure. Exactly. And they're gonna lead. They're gonna stand up, because the Jewish women aren't gonna let the Jewish people fall apart. And they will stand up and lead.
And it will fall.
Okay, so just want to share all that with you, just to kind of give the class at least one powerful point. Because again, as I said, I'm feeling a little washed up today. But we had a good ending at least. Shalom, everybody.